Hello everyone, and welcome back to Daily English Voices. Before we begin, I want to be honest with you about what this video is and what it isn't. It is not a list of grammar tips, it is not a vocabulary cram session, and it is definitely not a speak perfect English in 30 days promise. This video is about something deeper and more useful, the real emotions behind learning a language: fear, hope, and the quiet power of keeping a promise to yourself. If you've ever stayed silent in a room full of confident voices, not because you had nothing to say but because you didn't know how to say it in English, then this story is for you. In the next few minutes, I will take you inside a journey from silence to speech. You will see how a single decision, "I won't stay quiet anymore," grew into a daily practice that changed everything. No private tutor. No expensive course. Just simple tools and steady courage, mirror talk in the morning, 10 honest minutes of speaking in the evening, and a few whispered sentences before sleep. You'll learn how fear lives in the body and how breathing, repetition, and small exposures melt it, one sentence at a time. This is not about sounding perfect. It's about sounding like yourself, clear, calm, and free. Along the way, you'll hear about the hard days, the frozen interview, the shaking hands, the voice that breaks. You'll also hear about the small wins that no one posts online: ordering tea without panic, helping a stranger with directions, introducing yourself to a group and staying standing. These moments don't look big from the outside, but they are the bricks that build real confidence. By the end of this video, you'll have a simple path you can start today, no matter your level, your age, or your budget. You don't need to be confident to begin, you gain confidence by beginning. If this message speaks to you, stay with me. Let this be the day you stop waiting for perfect English and start building your voice, 5 minutes at a time. This is the story of how one learner stopped hiding and started living in English, and how you can, too. My name is Mia. I grew up in a town most people drive past without noticing, the kind of place where the bus comes twice a day and dreams are measured carefully so they don't spill over the edges. My dad repaired bicycles in a small shed that smelled like oil and sunlight. My mom cleaned houses and hummed old songs while she folded other people's laundry into neat, respectful squares. We didn't own computers or shelves of books. We spoke our own language, fast and warm, and English was something that lived inside television screens: smooth voices, easy laughter, no effort at all. That was not my world. In school, I could read slowly, and sometimes I understood. But when the teacher called my name and asked me to speak, a cold hand gripped my throat. I remember standing in front of the class to say one simple line: "My name is Mia and I want to be a teacher," and nothing came out. The room laughed the way rooms do when they aren't cruel, just careless. I sat down knowing I had thoughts worth saying but no bridge to reach them. That afternoon, I walked home with my head low and the laughter in my ears like a small, sharp stone in my shoe. I stopped at a shop window and saw myself reflected in the glass, tired, angry, and a little afraid. I whispered something I had never said out loud before: "One day I will speak English. I don't know how long it will take, but I will not stay silent." No trumpets sounded. No new books appeared. Nothing magical happened. But a promise was born, and promises, even the quiet ones, have a way of changing the air around you. The next morning I woke up early, splashed water on my face, and stood in front of a cracked mirror. "Today I start," I told myself. But the truth arrived immediately. My mouth felt heavy, my mind went blank, and the simplest sentence looked like a mountain. I recorded my voice on an old phone my father had stopped using. "My name is Mia. I want to learn English." When I pressed play, I wanted to delete the sound. I sounded slow and uncertain, like someone borrowing a language that didn't fit his hands. I sat on the edge of the bed with tears I didn't plan to cry. I realized English was not my only problem. Fear lived in my shoulders, in my breath, in my jaw. I was fighting more than words. But a promise is a stubborn kind of seed. The day after, I tried again with a different approach. Instead of chasing perfect sentences, I chased honest ones. I looked into the mirror and said, I want to be better. My tongue didn't know where to place the sounds, but the sentence felt true. That truth gave me a window to climb through. I built a simple ritual because rituals steady the shaking parts of us. In the morning, while brushing my teeth, I named the day, Good morning. Today I will try. After school, I shut the door, stood by the mirror, and spoke for 10 minutes about lunch, about the weather, about my father's hands stained black with grease. At night, before sleep, I whispered 3 small sentences into the dark. It wasn't elegant. It wasn't impressive. But it was mine. I wasn't trying to sound like anyone else. I was trying to sound like myself in English. 3 weeks went by like that, and then something small but astonishing happened. I caught myself thinking in English, just for a few seconds, planning the words I might use tomorrow, hearing the rhythm of a phrase before I spoke it. I have no other way to say this, I cried. Not because I was sad, but because for the first time I believed my promise wasn't a fantasy. The brain changes when we treat it with patience, it learns the shape of a new path. Of course, growth is stubborn and complicated. A man from the city stopped at the grocery near our house and asked me, kindly, for directions in English. I understood. I had practiced answers like this, and still my mouth locked like a door with the wrong key. Another person helped him, and life went on. I walked home ashamed and angry, and for a moment I considered giving up my ritual. But the promise wouldn't let me. The next morning I woke up early again and spoke into the mirror, not because I felt brave but because I had decided to keep my word to myself. That decision, repeated, became a kind of courage. A month into this quiet training, someone told me about a free conversation circle at the community center 2 towns over. The words, free, and conversation, sat together in my mind like 2 magnets turning toward each other. I was terrified. I went anyway. There were 11 people sitting in a loose circle: students, shop workers, a grandmother with bright eyes and a volunteer coordinator who greeted everyone without measuring their grammar first. When it was my turn, I stood up and said, hello. My name is Mia. I am learning. I am afraid, but I am here. The circle clapped. Not for elegance, not for perfection, but for honesty. That sound entered my chest like a beam of sunlight through a dusty window. I began attending every Sunday, speaking a little more each week, sometimes only 3 sentences, sometimes 5, but always 1 more than the week before. I listened to others make mistakes without shame, and in their courage I borrowed my own. The wins were small and quiet. I managed to order tea in English for a tourist and understood his thank you. I helped a little boy spell train and tree, and we both laughed when he made the sound choo-choo. I started reading short paragraphs out loud at home and then retelling them in my own words. I learned to record myself, listen without judgment, and try again, not to punish my errors but to correct them with kindness and repetition. I invented challenges: 1 minute of storytelling without pausing, 60 seconds describing a photograph, 10 lines explaining a scene from my day. I noticed that when I spoke about what I truly cared about, the smell of rain on old roads, my mother's humming, the way my father never gave up on a rusted chain, English came faster. Emotion clears the path for language. By the 3rd month, the community center posted a notice: a local marketing office looking for student assistants, basic English required. I prepared like my life depended on it. I practiced a short introduction in front of the mirror until my reflection could have said it without me. I rehearsed answers to common questions. I ironed my shirt until it looked like a promise. I walked into the interview room, and the man across the table smiled and said, "Tell us about yourself." And then, just like that old day in class, a cold hand closed over my voice. The words shattered into pieces on the floor of my mind. I stitched together a broken sentence, "I want job because I like learn," and watched their kind eyes try not to show their worry. The interview ended. I thanked them, walked outside, and cried beneath the sky. I didn't practice that night. I lay awake listening to the cruel voice that visits all of us, "You're pretending. You're not improving. You will never belong." In the morning, I found a note I had written months earlier and taped to the inside of my closet, "As long as you don't stop, you're still winning." I stared at that line until the letters felt like a hand on my shoulder. The problem wasn't English. The problem was a belief that mistakes meant I didn't deserve to be in the room. I took a breath and changed my training. If fear lived in public spaces, I would visit those spaces gently until fear ran out of places to hide. I designed small exposures and kept them gentle. I practiced "hello" and "good morning" with shopkeepers I already knew in my own language and added one English sentence. I set a timer for 60 seconds and spoke to the mirror as if it were a stranger, short, clear, not perfect. I read a paragraph and then summarized it into 3 sentences, focusing on connection rather than cleverness. I recorded 1-minute updates on my phone each day and listened to them on the bus, not to judge, but to notice. I trained my breath, in through the nose, out through pursed lips, speaking on the exhale so my words rode on air instead of panic. I practiced looking up while talking instead of staring into the safety of the floor. I didn't try to impress. I tried to express. Something began to shift. I still made errors, but they were smaller and softer. They didn't interrupt the meaning. People understood me more often on the first try. And when they didn't, I repeated calmly instead of rushing or shrinking. Confidence, I learned, is not the absence of errors, it's the willingness to continue through them. The community circle noticed it, too. One Sunday, the coordinator pulled me aside and said we were planning a small event, a public session with guests from the city. "We want you to welcome everyone," he said. The old fear rose in me, a familiar ghost, but this time I knew its name. I said yes. I didn't write a full script. I wrote anchor points, my beginning, my promise, my practice, my stumbles, and the one sentence that had become my compass: "You are not here to impress, you are here to express." Each evening that week, I stood at the mirror and told my story as if a friend had asked, "How did you do it?" On the morning of the event, I warmed up my voice with simple phrases and walked to the hall counting my breaths. There were 40 people, students, teachers, a few who looked like they lived their lives in English already. My hands trembled, so I pressed my fingertips together and let the tremble be. I stepped up, smiled at the room, and began. "Good afternoon. My name is Mia. A few months ago, I would not have been able to say that to you without shaking. Today, I'm standing here because I didn't stop." The hall grew quiet in the way rooms do when people are actually listening. I told them about the bicycle shop, the class where my voice failed, the shop window where I made a promise. I told them about the mirror and the ritual and the night I cried after hearing my own recorded voice. I told them about the interview and the note in my closet, about the tiny victories no one photographs: the tourist who understood my directions, the grandmother at the circle who patted my shoulder and said, "Slow is smooth. Smooth is fast." I said, "Fluency is not sounding like someone else. It is sounding like yourself without fear." People nodded. Some smiled the way you do when a sentence lands in the place you were hoping someone would notice. When the clapping came, it felt like rain after a dry season, not dramatic, just necessary. I didn't cry on the stage. I waited until I was outside, beneath a small tree with leaves that looked like little green hands. The boy who had been afraid to say his name had just spoken for 8 minutes to a room of strangers and, more importantly, to himself. Not perfectly. Not without minor stumbles. But freely. And freedom, once tasted, changes the way you walk. That night I wrote a new line next to the old note in my closet: I am not learning English anymore. I am living in English. I didn't mean the work was finished. I meant the subject had stopped being a subject and started being a language I used to understand my world and let my world understand me. When I listened to music, I listened for story. When I watched a video, I watched for rhythm, how sentences rose and fell like the hills behind our town. When I spoke to myself in the morning, it felt less like practice and more like greeting a friend. With time, I built habits that kept the fire steady. I read short articles and retold them in my words, paying attention to the verbs like tools in a belt. I kept a tiny notebook of phrases that sounded alive: make a point, keep your word, grow into yourself, and I used them out loud so they wouldn't gather dust. I revisited the same topics again and again: family, work, weather, music, because repetition turns the unfamiliar into furniture you can navigate in the dark. I learned to laugh at my mistakes instead of apologizing for them. Laughter is a bridge that carries people toward you. Apology, repeated too often, can build a wall you have to climb every time you open your mouth. I also learned something practical about courage. Courage is not huge and shiny. It is a string of small decisions: to show up when you're tired, to open your mouth when a simpler silence beckons, to ask, "Could you repeat that?" without shrinking. On buses and in lines, I practiced short conversations. How's your day? Busy, yours? Busy too. Nothing grand. But each exchange added a brick to a house called confidence. One afternoon at the bicycle shed, a tourist stopped to get air in his tire. My dad nodded at me with that quiet nod that fathers use when they're handing you a chance. I explained the pump, asked where he was from, listened to an answer about a small town far away, and wished him a safe trip. When he left, my father said only, "Good." In that one word, there was a whole paragraph about growth, about pride, about a son who had created a bridge where there used to be a river. If you are still listening, I want to turn this story gently toward you. I don't know the shape of your fear or the weight of your days. I don't know whether you, like me, learned to hold your voice at the back of your throat just in case someone laughed. But I know this: your fear is real and it is not permanent. Language grows the way a path through a field grows, by walking it daily. You do not need elegant sentences to begin. You need honest ones. I am trying. I want to be better. Please say that again. These are not small, they are keys. You may freeze the first time you speak to a stranger. You may freeze the second time and the third. That does not mean you have failed. It means your brain is doing something difficult and your body is catching up. You are not behind. You are building new roads inside yourself, and roadwork is noisy. Keep going. The mirror can be a kind teacher if you let it. Record your voice and listen with the compassion you would use for a friend. Find people who clap for honesty. If you cannot find them, be the first one to clap for yourself. I will not pretend there is no work. There is work. But most of it is not glamorous. It is 5 minutes when you are tired and 10 minutes when you would rather scroll. It is telling the same story again until it stops feeling like a test and starts feeling like a memory. It is learning to breathe. It is giving yourself permission to sound like a person who is learning, which is to say, a person who is alive. Months after that first welcome speech, I walked past the shop window where I had made my promise. The glass still held a version of me, a little older, maybe a little taller in the way that conviction lengthens your spine. I said aloud, "Thank you for not stopping." A woman passing by glanced at me and smiled as if she had heard a private joke. I smiled back. Then I kept walking, because the road was still long and beautifully unfinished. In the end, this journey was never about flawless grammar or sounding like someone else. It was about a promise, a small, private sentence that grew strong because it was repeated, not because it was perfect. If you remember only one thing, let it be this: fluency is not a finish line, it is a daily choice. Each morning you decide to show up. Each evening you give yourself 10 honest minutes. Each night you whisper a few lines into the quiet and let your voice learn the road home. That is how confidence is built, not in a single dramatic moment, but in 1,000 steady steps. You will still have days when your mouth feels heavy and your thoughts move faster than your words. You will still meet situations that wake up old fears. Let them come. Breathe. Speak anyway. Courage is not what arrives when fear disappears, courage is what you practice in the presence of fear. And each time you speak through it, even with shaky hands, you train your mind to trust you. Over time, that trust becomes freedom. Remember how the small wins worked: a greeting at the shop, a clear sentence with a stranger, a short introduction in a circle of learners. None of those moments made the news, but together they changed everything. That is your blueprint: keep the wins small and keep them coming. Read out loud. Retell what you read in your own words. Record a 1-minute update on your phone. Ask someone to repeat themselves without apologizing for existing. Aim to express, not impress. I believe you can do this not because you need to be extraordinary, but because you are human and humans grow where they give steady attention. So take the next small step. Keep your promise. Live in English a little more today than yesterday. And when your voice shakes, smile, it means you're moving.